Hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here. In 2019 on this channel we looked at the Street Fighter EX Trilogy, a sub-series of games that featured the characters and gameplay of Street Fighter using 3D polygon models for the first time. The games that were a direct response to the success of Virtua Fighter and Tekken would see the debut of multiple memorable new characters such as Pull and Perma and Skullomania for example. But over the years, as new Street Fighter games were released, none of the characters who originated in the EX games would go on to appear as playable fighters in any future Capcom releases. But what not everybody knows is that in 2018 a fourth EX game would finally be released, which would feature many of the old favourite characters that had been established in the original EX trilogy prior. Skullomania and company were finally back to entertain a new generation of gamers, and this time the Street Fighter branding was not even being utilised. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the mad story of Fighting EX Layer, the fourth EX game. Yeah! To recap our history, in 1996 Street Fighter EX would see release in the arcades for the Sony ZN hardware. Prior to this, all Street Fighter games had utilised gameplay that was built around 2D sprites, which had always proved successful to Capcom. But with the release of Tekken and Virtua Fighter, many wanted to see Street Fighter brought to the third dimension too. While this was a great idea in theory, Capcom neither had the technology nor the staff on hand to be able to pull off this very well. Previously they had released Star Gladiator in arcades, but it was rudimentary in comparison to polygon-based games put out by competitors. In order to achieve a polygonal Street Fighter game, Capcom would hand development of such a title over to a different company known as Arika. What made Arika special was that the company was headed by Akira Nishitani, an ex-Capcom employee who had become well known for designing Street Fighter 2 and Final Fight, alongside Akira Yasuda. So not only did Akira already hold Capcom's trust, he had helped establish Street Fighter's success in the first place. EX would feature a similar fighting system to other Street Fighter games, but the linear plane in which characters fight often changes along a 3D arena. There were multiple other nuances too, such as super meters being split into 3 sections and guard breaks functioning differently. The most striking feature though was certainly the graphics and all of the new characters who had been mixed in with Street Fighter favourites. The game would receive an arcade upgrade in 1997 known as Street Fighter EX+. And since the game was developed on Sony ZN hardware, this made it easy for Arika to port the game to the Sony PlayStation that year too, resulting in another updated version, this time for the home, known as Street Fighter EX Plus Alpha. The game would receive an arcade sequel in 1998 known as Street Fighter EX2, along with a home port known as Street Fighter EX2 Plus in 1999. EX2 would retain all of the features of the first EX game, but expand the roster size and introduce XL combos, allowing players to connect a series of basic and special moves for a limited time. Big change would occur though in the year 2000 with the release of EX3, a game that would function as a North American launch title for the PlayStation 2. The game included large graphical enhancements and the removal of guard breaks in favour of the surprise blow mechanic. Tag mechanics were also brought in, which would utilise features such as Critical Parade, calling out a tag partner to simultaneously battle your opponent for a limited time. The game would also include dramatic battles and other new features, but none of this was enough to stop the game from being completely obliterated sales-wise by the likes of Tekken Tag. At this point in time, it seemed like Street Fighter as a standalone brand had been milked so much that it had run out of steam. And when it comes to polygon gaming, Tekken Tag was way more impressive, rightfully outselling Street Fighter EX3. For a few years, Street Fighter characters would continue to appear as 2D sprites in various Capcom crossover fighting games, but the franchise would not truly return until Street Fighter 4, 8 years later in 2008. Despite the game's runaway success, popularity and 3D polygon-based gameplay, none of these future installments would include EX fighters, which one assumes is probably down to the fact that those characters remained property of Arika. Speaking of Arika, through the years that they had been developing the EX series, they had actually developed another fighting game too, known as Fighting Layer, which saw release in 1998. The game that was published by Namco would feature 3D fighting gameplay that was very similar to their Street Fighter games, and would even contain some of the same mechanics, such as being able to cancel supers into other supers and universal guard break attacks. In fact, in addition to this game's own roster of unique fighters, Arika would even go as far as to include 2 Street Fighter EX characters amongst the game's lineup, Alan Snyder and Blair Dame, marrying up the 2 franchises early on. While both the EX and Fighting Layer brands would remain dormant for many years on, Arika would make the bold decision to release a game known as Fighting EX Layer, a game that included Skullomania and company for the first time in 18 years. Interestingly, in the huge gap in time between new EX games, it turns out that Arika had been pitching multiple ideas for a new Street Fighter EX game to Capcom for years. At one point they even created a working demo for the Nintendo 3DS, but Capcom had rejected every single pitch. In early 2017, Arika would drop a trailer showcasing a new EX fighting game that they had created in Unreal Engine 4. It was quickly noted by fighting game fans that this trailer had aired on April 1st, making many people realise that this was a hugely elaborate April Fool's joke. Even the video description would confirm this, stating,
"These are April Fool's stories and not being officially considered for release at this stage. So even if you contact the official Arika Corporation, there's nothing you can do at this time."
The response overall to the trailer ended up being so positive that Arika made the decision to make their joke concept into a full game, making me wonder whether the April Fool's Day trailer drop was simply clever hype and test marketing to begin with. Arika would soon show another trailer, and this video had the message attached to it.
Arika has decided to begin development on a PlayStation 4 version of mysterious fighting game title undecided, and make a public announcement on the final day of EVO 2017. This game will be the newest entry in the EX series.
The game would be officially confirmed at the competitive fighting game event, and development of the Arika self-funded fighting game would continue to progress along. Akira Nishitani noted that the company had just enough funds to see the project through to completion without any external help, while admitting that a new EX game was primarily a passion project. His goal was still though to make a new fighting game that continued to keep the company financially healthy. In November 2017, the game's Fighting EX Layer name was finally revealed. A public beta featuring 6 playable characters was made available to download on the PlayStation 4 on the 11th of December 2017 and ran for 2 weeks. The developers used the beta to test online connectivity and gather player feedback. The finished game will be made available to purchase on the PS4 as of June 2018, interestingly being on sale in 2 variants, a standard edition of the game and a low-priced light version that included less features. Over time though, the light version would be phased out, with the standard version becoming the sole consumer option. Initially on release, the game debuted with a smaller roster selection, with online play being the main attraction. But 2 weeks after the release, Arika announced a free arcade mode update, which could be added to the game 1 month after it first appeared on the market. During EVO 2018, Arika would also announce that Pull & Perma and Rosso of Street Fighter EX fame would also be made available as free updates as of September, and more characters could be added via free updates as the game was slowly fleshed out. On top of all of this though, one paid downloadable character could later be added to the game too, SNK's Terry Bogard, who was made playable within an EX game for the first time ever, which was a cool touch I must say. In terms of gameplay, Fighting EX Layer is a game that retains many of the mechanics of Arika produced fighting games of old, such as super cancels, juggling and more, all of which are possible by taking advantage of this game's 6-button layout. In this entry, movement is swifter than ever before too, with the addition of a dash feature which allows for more responsive movement than in any previous Arika games. GameSpot noted that the gameplay found within EX Layer is heavily defined by 2 mechanics. The first of these is the ability to chain attacks into special and super moves, and cancelling mid-air combos. EX Layer has the edge over many other fighting games with regards to how smooth and free-flowing cancelling feels. This can lead to spectacular impressive combos that involve multiple special and super skills that can be executed in quick succession. The game's fantastic implementation of cancelling combined with the great dash movement overall makes gameplay as fluid as one could possibly want. A new feature to the EX series with this one is the inclusion of what is known as Guji Boosts, basically a feature that allows for enhancements and bonuses during matches. To break down further exactly what this is, a Guji is a pre-constructed deck of 5 special skills that can be activated when certain conditions are met in a bout. The enhancements that these can lead to allow for the likes of increased movement speed, for example. Skills found amongst each Guji deck are purposely designed to be paired up well with each other. GameSpot pointed out that the Infinity deck contains 3 boosts to build in super meter and 2 other skills that make use of this extra meter gain, allowing you to play by building and spending meter very quickly. Some of these decks are arguably more useful than others, while some require a lot of trial and error to get to grips with, but all in all this is a nice little feature that adds to the overall experience. In many ways, Fighting EX Layer has been heavily produced with the hardcore competitive fighting gamer in mind. The game consists of a roster full of cult favourites and takes advantage of a fighting game system built around experimentation that utilises many more technical aspects of the fighting game genre. In terms of review feedback for the game, reviewers on the whole were impressed with the gameplay that could be found, but many felt the game should have a bigger roster and more single player functionality. PlayStation Universe would write, the game is
a deeply engaging fighter that resurrects the Street Fighter EX combat mechanics of yesteryear. Fighting EX Layer's lack of single-player content unfortunately makes it difficult to recommend to folks who aren't rapidly engaged in its online multiplayer shenanigans. Those who are, however, will find much to enjoy.
Gamers Heroes would comment,
Fighting EX Layer does not have a lot of options or fighters to choose from, but it does have a lot of heart. A lot of work went into its design, and those looking for a fighter that is a little out of the ordinary should set out to master its unique system.
ZTGD would praise the game, stating,
For those who grew up with Erica's work, Fighting EX Layer is a pure joy to play. I hope they continue to support the game and add more and more content as it goes on.
Destructoid would be a bit more critical of the product when a journalist would write,
As someone who has been playing fighters for nearly 3 decades, I can get on board with Fighting EX Layer's lack of pageantry. What I can't accept quite as earnestly is its issue with roster playstyle diversity. The foundation is there, it just needs to be built up further.
GameSpot would love the game, commenting,
On a pure gameplay level, Fighting EX Layer is an absolute treat. What it lacks in bells and whistles, it delivers in pure fun combat. This is a game made for the sort of people who will spend hours perfecting an impractical, extremely precise combo in training mode simply for the satisfaction of having done it. If that describes you, then Fighting EX Layer will be worth everything you put into it.
To summarise, I think it is beyond cool that Eureka made the 4th game in the EX series, 18 years on from the last entry, even if they did not have Capcom's publishing assistance this time around. It is beyond awesome to see the lineup of EX fighters resurface so many years removed from the originals. The title basically is Street Fighter EX4, with a cast of characters to back that up. Interestingly, since this game has launched, the EX brand has continued to breathe new life. This includes the debut of a female version of Skullomania, who is playable in SNK Heroines Tag Team Frenzy, and even the inclusion of Fighting EX Layer costumes within Street Fighter V itself. So the Capcom Eureka crossover work has resumed, at least to some small extent. All in all, I feel the emergence of Fighting EX Layer has proved to be a very interesting recent entry in gaming history that is heavily built on EX's legacy. Something that until fairly recently was largely ignored. Seeing Skullomania and friends rise like a phoenix from the ashes has been an entertaining scenario, leaving me pondering what is next for these underutilised fighters. So, ladies and gentlemen, that was the mad story of Fighting EX Layer, the long-awaited sequel to the Street Fighter EX series. Let me know in the comments what you thought of today's video. I'd also be keen to know if you have had much experience with this game, and what you thought of the whole thing. For regular fighting game history, beat 'em up content and more, make sure you subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell to never miss a video. And if you're a hardcore supporter of my work, or have a love for Skullomania, you may too have a love for Double Dragon Neon Skullmageddon, who this week on Patreon I've uploaded a Patreon beat 'em up biopic episode covering this character's history. In fact, I now have nearly a dozen exclusive videos you can unlock for just $5, and I add a new one to the exclusive library weekly. So if you want to help ensure the future of this channel, and also get way more videos, then I'd love to hear from you over on the Patreon platform. Speaking of patrons, thank yous go out to Sebastian Velez, Carl Johnson, The Murder of Crows, Heo Paulo Lopez, Joseph Rasmick, Ben Harradine, Corey Imar Sr., Capcom vs SNK, BXL Gotham, Rowan Dinch, Evan Border, Philip Namph, Azra Arakai, Keith Ferguson, Joaquin Varela, Michael Cullix, Ego, Jordan Durant, Angelite85, Nick Daniels, Princess Zana, Glennie Glenn, Daniel Daly, Computer Man, House of a Ted, Gary Pinkett, ECU Professor, Kid Anime, Justin Wang, Aaron McNamara, Hermes Gonzalez, Instant Gratification Monkey, Man Shovel, James Bishop, JB, Michael Hall, Wesley Sang Hee, Wayne Kerr, Langston Miller, Noob, Brian Barry, Sarah Powell, Blaming Renee, Marvin Araliga, Chris Cool, TOG Driver, Adrian Hannington, Bernard NG, Richard Stu Stewart, James McDonald, Dan Van Dammit, Lewis Viant, John Bates, David Bowell, Chris Fisk, Mike Bruno, Rick67, Antonio Rodriguez, Craig Jenkins, Retroverse.com, Casey Wright, Synth Spaces, Zai, Andrew Bazansky, Gunther Hendricks, and everybody else who backs me over on the Patreon platform. Thank you to everybody who continues to tune into this channel. I love you all very much. Thank you. Cheerio.